have Jason Bryant. He's the founder of Matt Talk Online, longtime wrestling writer, broadcaster, and announcer. So you guys are probably very familiar with him. Jason, how's it going?
Well, it's going to be a warm day here in New Brighton, as my Twitter indicates, every morning at 9:30 Central Time. That with our forecast and the weather, I'm a bit of a weather nerd, so it's always a good day weather-wise this time of year. The springtime is great here in Minnesota. Emotionally, though, it's been a little tough for ye old yours truly here with the news that's going on, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit. But otherwise, things are good. My kids are healthy, even though they're out of school. My wife and I have been trying to do our best with the the stay home ordinance from our governor here in Minnesota, and it's great because I've got this nice space that's all mine, while the girls can have the run of the house on the outside. And we've got our a lot of time together, and it's really actually been pretty cool to have 21 meals a week at the table together. So it's our eating out budget has decreased considerably, and I'm cooking a lot more, which is something I always like to do anyway. So. Everything outside of that once in Norfolk has been great. Well, and of course the no wrestling thing, that kind of sucks too.
Yeah, kind of. It's rough. What's it look like for you guys at the Bryant household with the girls at home and your wife at home? What does a daily schedule look like for you guys?
Well, Lucy is our 7-year-old, and she was the one born in Colorado while I was still working at USA Wrestling in 2012. Middle name is London after the Olympic year, as is my youngest daughter, Ruby Rio, born in 2016. So, yes, distinct Olympic theme with the girls. And Ruby sleeps a little bit better than Lucy, but Lucy is up around 6:15, walks into our room, which is across the hall, and goes, "Mom, it's not quite 6:30 yet, so I'm going to just stay here." So she's got 6:30. Is like, no, you can't get up any earlier than 6:30. And then my wife ends up playing some type of game involving I don't know what stuffed animals from Lion King are playing these games every morning. I hear it down the hallway. I get a little bit of a reprieve till about 7:30, and then Ruby is up, and then it's breakfast time for the girls, and usually it's a breakfast snack. Then we get a breakfast probably around 8:30. Lucy starts her distance learning right around 8:30 or 9, so we go through the modules that they've sent the kids each day. Ruby being 3, and her Montessori school is not open, so it's basically been Abby and I trading each other shifts. Basically, when I can get my interviews done, it's based on like, okay, what's your meeting schedule, Abby? Okay, my wife, who is a rock star at what she does, has so many meetings. I mean, I'm just like, how can you have 8 meetings a day, 5 days a week? It's crazy on how some of the business world works, and makes me sometimes wonder, like, could I have survived there? I don't know. I spent a lot of time on the phone and on video calls. I don't know if I could do it. So she's definitely better than me in that respect. So we're doing a really good balance of parenting, adulting, and then trying to get the kids to bed early enough is really the struggle, so we can at least do something and watch Better Call Saul and Top Chef and finish through The Office. And we've got Ozark just started too. We haven't even dove into Tiger King yet, but these are things as adults you look for your 3 hours before you go to bed each night. That's our time, although we are under the roof and next to each other all the time. And it's actually been pretty cool to spend that much more time with your significant other. I mean, you're recently married. You're going to know this stuff really, really quickly, because the first year Abby and I were married, we were apart. We only saw each other 7 days a month, because she was ultra commuting from Memphis and I was in Colorado Springs. So this is like the complete opposite. We're going on 10 years, and it's completely different from our first year. So it's been really good at home. I mean, I'm again disappointed that I didn't have a chance to bring them to the NCAA championships. They were coming. They were coming to Minnesota. Coming to Minnesota. We live here. They were coming to the tournament. My in-laws were going to come to the tournament. I had family that was ready to go to the tournament, and I had tickets for them to go to the tournament. So that was one of the disappointing things about this. But as far as, with the life and the family here, I've got my little speakeasy, my man cave, my pub, my studio, my everything. I got my little space that I can just pop open PlayStation 2 and continue my NCAA football 08 dynasty, which is kind of ironic considering the situation right now.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like all is good for you guys. Have you learned anything about Abby that you maybe didn't know as far as her business side, seeing her and hearing her in all of her meetings?
Well, one is the balance it takes to be able to multitask. And I think that's something that, in the sport of wrestling, and you in that job, it very well, because I sat there, not necessarily in the same desk, but being able to multitask and having to do so many things at events. Okay, I think of things differently. And then to see You got the dual screens, you got the emails, you got the IMs coming up while you're on a call nonstop. I mean, it's just like the delegation and the professionalism that I totally joke that I married up, and that's actually not a joke. It's a complete fact. So, I married an MBA from the University of Minnesota with an undergrad from a small school here, and go figure. It's just it's been a really good thing. What have I learned? No, I think after the last 10 years, I think we've got most things figured out, but there are some things every now and then that I keep learning. And that's the cool thing about being married to somebody that's you didn't grow up with, or we didn't live together before we were married. So a lot of that first year, those 7 days a month that we were together, was just like, okay, which side of the bed do you prefer? Where do you want your toothbrush? I mean, I still don't know where to put certain things, because the filing system with the dirty clothes, that's something I'll never figure out. Why do we have 2 darks and 1 whites? No, that's colored, that's darks, and that's whites. I'm like, no, they're not white. They're going in that bin. And I'm still fighting that battle each day.
You're gonna lose.
Gonna lose. I'm already down 14 to the second. This 10 years, going in the second period, I'm down 14, and I chose top.
So let's get into the reason why we brought you on. Unfortunately, last week, Old Dominion, your alma mater, discontinued its wrestling program. I want to start with this. Like, what was your initial reaction, and did you kind of hear whispers of it at all, or was it a complete shock to you?
Completely stunned. And I've maintained a pretty good relationship with the staff even since my graduation. And as I've mentioned on other shows, this staff was not the staff I came through with. Gray Simons, a previous coach, retired my last year at school. So this program was re-energized when Steve Martin got the job in 2004, 2005. And I've maintained a pretty good relationship with the program since. I've got a podcast with them. They were my first client on the Matt Talk Podcast Network. Them and Virginia Tech, 2 schools I knew very well, that I had good relationships with those coaches. And they really helped me jump off with my business and showing a model that worked. And as far as the surprise, I was in the middle of doing my Rudis podcast with Matt Dernland. And I, halfway through it, we were arguing about the 75th anniversary team as one of our topics, and I got a text, and with an iPhone, some people know you've got iMessage that shows up on your computer, and there was Matt Small who came through with me at ODU. He actually wrestled for Steve Martin in high school and wrestled for Gray at Old Dominion, and he's a coach at Great Bridge High School. Actually coaches Steve Martin's son, who won a state championship this year as a sophomore. And Matt texted me that ODU was axed, and I'm in the middle of the call, and I was like, went to the website real quick and tried to find anything, nothing. And my co-announcer, Brian Hazard, his son, is a wrestler at Old Dominion. He had started at Lehigh, transferred to ODU, and Coach Hazard and Coach Martin's relationship go back from when they were growing up wrestling one another and on teams and such like that. But when we look at how I found out and the thoughts of it happening, I was completely blown away, blindsided. I mean, assistant coaches found out through email. They told the team through a Zoom meeting. I mean, and the word Zoom meeting wasn't even a thing a month ago. Now it's, everybody's conducting business that way. But I had no clue. And I think that's one thing that makes us mad as alumni, even though I never stepped on the mat. I want to make that abundantly clear. I was not an athlete at Old Dominion, but my roommates were in various sports, and I've been a contributor to the General Athletics Fund. I've got a brick for the football stadium that they built. Don't know where that's going to get thrown, depending on the outcome here. But it's one of those things that the relationship's been good, and we were surprised. And that's one thing as an alum I would like to know is, like, if you were going to do this, why not let us know? You can't surprise us like that and then shut us out. So that has kind of been the feeling in the last couple of days. It was Thursday at 4:04 p.m. is when I found out Central Time, and it's something that has barely been consuming. And right now, having to balance your wife's work schedule and the kids, and then I've got client shows to do and try to come up with content for the other stuff for the podcast network, and then try to figure out and be on the phone to know what everything's going to happen in Norfolk. I'm 1,000 miles away. I really can't do a lot from here. So that's been the really unnerving part of all of it, is not being able to feel like you're doing enough. So that was the surprise. And again, we had no idea.
Yeah. So when were you in school there?
I was in there. Wow, that's the loaded question, because I had a very long undergraduate career at Old Dominion. I started there in August of 1997. I graduated high school in 1997. I turned 18 on August 20th. On August 23rd, I was in Whitehurst Hall, room 440B. So 3 days after I turned 18, I went to college. 8 days before I turned 25, I got out of college. So I was there from 1997, the fall of 97, and then I walked in May of 2004, finished up my last class that summer, went through a bunch of different different trips to Fargo during my time in college, scheduling my summer classes around Fargo, and as a college student with freedom, and I had a job, so I had some discretionary funds. I didn't make the right decisions all the time my first couple years, and it took actually the current president, John Broderick at Old Dominion, to really help me with a financial situation in terms of how to do it as a student and get things back on track. And my last 3 years were phenomenal. My grades were through the roof. I made the dean's list. So, the mistakes, you can undo your mistakes as a college student, but some of those things I learned, those kids that were coming in and they were like, yeah, what's college like? I was like, go to class. That's the one thing I think I learned the most out of making all those mistakes academically initially was go to class. Just if you're there, you're going to get the benefit of that. Even if it's a Friday morning class and Thirsty Thursday hits you a little too hard, you're there. The professor's going to see you made the effort to get there, even though they know what you did the night before. So I was a 7-year undergrad. All the freshmen, when I was a senior, called me either Gramps or I think the Tommy Boy line has been thrown at me more than any other line. Is a lot of people go to college for 7 years. Yeah, they're called doctors. So I've heard that countless times, and it's not really a sense of pride, but it's one of those things where things happen for a reason, and there's a reason I think I spent 7 years there, because it ultimately led me to jobs in wrestling, and I wouldn't be talking to you right now. I wouldn't have had the job there at USA Wrestling if I would have just graduated in 4 years. Who knows where I would have been? But it was really those last 3 that really kind of helped me develop and realize, hey, you've got to man up. You got to be an adult. And I had to become an adult on 2 different occasions in my life. Once was when I had to come back to college and make the dean's list, and the other is when I was up here in Minnesota when Wrestling 411 died after 1 year. So there's 2 life-changing experiences, and the first one came at Old Dominion, and learning basically, you screw up, it's on you, and it's hard to dig yourself out. And those are lessons I try to tell people now, that when they go to college, those are things you need to learn. I mean, the landscape's different and the style of learning is different, but ultimately, even when you can go back to class, when this whole pandemic is done, go to class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Clearly, you stuck it out in one place, that being ODU. So it must have been a nice place. It must have been a good community. Can you elaborate just kind of on what it was like to be a student there from, I guess, a community perspective, and I guess even athletics perspective, knowing that you were around it?
Old Dominion went through such a facelift in the time I was there. And to give some backstory here, my older sister went to Old Dominion from 1980 to 83 before she got engaged and moved to California, ended up finishing at Long Beach State. That's a weird connection right there. But the campus was it was a commuter school. There was only a couple of dorms. There was a football field on campus that Norfolk State played. They were the HBCU in town that was in the MEAC, or back then the CIAA. So they would actually play their home football games at Old Dominion's campus, even though ODU didn't have football up until they built their own stadium. And Foreman Field was the big field there. And, I had season tickets to men's and women's basketball. I had seen so many college sporting events there. The semi-pro football games that I was helping with, some guys that worked for the local radio station would pick me up. I was like a 7th or 8th grader living in Newport News, and before I even moved to Pocosin, they'd pick me up. I'd be their stat guy for semi-pro football on WODU, which was like the campus radio station, which was, its power was like as far as the end of the block. It really wasn't anything, but it was those experiences, and my my older sister going there and having Old Dominion sweatshirts growing up. I mean, it just, ODU was just kind of part of my life from the get-go. And then when I started there, it was really viewed as a commuter school. We didn't have, you go there now. When I started in 1997, it was completely different. It's a beautiful campus. We've got so many new buildings. We got a great athletics facilities. I mean, the football, I haven't seen the new stadium, and I don't know if I will, considering what we're talking about right now, but I was at the first game in school history there, or the revitalized, since they dropped it in the 40s when they were a junior college. But they cleaned up a lot, and the campus is urban, and it's sandwiched between a I don't want to say a slum by any means, but there's a neighborhood that's adjacent to it that's a little rough, and on the other side there's a neighborhood that's very affluent and old in Norfolk and very very elegant, I would say. So you kind of get all of it at ODU, and then you're a couple miles from the naval base. You got downtown Norfolk, which has got some great museums and history, and the Granby Street area has undergone a revitalization. Like Norfolk used to kind of have kind of a grim thing to it, and that's totally changed. And it's really, it was a cool place to go to school because we like to joke that we did more with less at the time, and now that people coming through there, their facilities are amazing. I mean, the distance learning curriculum that they have with the Teletetnet building, I think it's named Gornto. We just called it the Teletetnet building. I mean, I lived across from the library for 2 years, didn't see much of the inside of it, but that's a tremendous facility. The oceanography program there is phenomenal. The Bud Metheny baseball complex is a great place to watch college baseball. The soccer facilities are good. The tennis facilities are amazing. I mean, they leveled the field house, which is where we used to play our men's and women's basketball. And now, again, they've got that giant arena called now I think it's called Chartway Arena. It was the TED Constant Convocation Center, which we called the TED. Well, when I started, the TED wasn't there. It was 5 bars. Friar Tuck's had wing night, legendary wing night. The 4400 Club was in, I think it was in one of the men's magazines. It's one of the party bars in the country back in the 80s. I mean, Mad Mike's and all these places that you probably shouldn't have been going into when you're at a certain age, but it was kind of, there was some weirdness about it. But then we've got University Village. It's just a dynamic. Now, I've been on some big campuses, and it's an urban campus that's got neighborhoods around it and such, but it's not like Oklahoma State. Walking through Stillwater, it's not quite like that type of expansive campus or Virginia Tech, which is all over Blacksburg. But it is a nice urban campus, and it's someplace that when I go back and walk around with my wife, or walk back with my roommate when he was inducted into the Sports Hall of Fame a couple years ago, I'm like, man, this is just so much different than we were here. And then we got to realize we're getting old. 1997 was 23 years ago. So those memories might be fresh, but I really loved my time there, and it was a period of pre-construction, really. The Constant Center opened my last 2 years. It was probably supposed to have been built in 1995. Cal Bowdler, who was an NBA player for the Atlanta Hawks, was told that on his recruiting trip he was supposed to play his last 2 years in the building. Well, it didn't get built till like 5 years after that. So again, it's a situation where the school has grown so much. It's no longer just a commuter school. I mean, walking around those first days when there's football on campus and you're seeing tailgating at Old Dominion, and it's like homecomings around a football game, it was different. You weren't getting that for homecoming soccer. I mean, it's just much as soccer was a really good sport at Old Dominion, it's just wasn't going to draw the homecoming crowd, and it really brought, I thought, the school together in terms of like, this is a real school now. And now, sadly, the real effects of college athletics have hit it as well.
Right. So what has been the response from other ODU alumni? I'm sure you're in contact with a lot of them. What has been, I guess, the plan of action for you guys?
Plan of action is something that is still in the formative processes. I mean, we can still measure this in hours. We're not even to a week yet. Mm-hmm. So what you might expect, people get the calls. The NWCA gets the call. The Wrestlers in Business Network gets the call. The wrestling club, the Alumni Association, the president gets inundated with emails. The AD gets inundated with emails. Those are the normal things that happen. As far as a strategy, we haven't even had some of those meetings yet that we're working on. We've had some temporary, some early preliminary calls on how to mobilize. So the mobilization is what's going on right now. When the athletic department tells one of our All-Americans that it's going to be a $25 million endowment figure, well, that's something we're probably going to have to be discussing here soon. But as far as what I've been told immediately, I mean, I got, it would probably be no surprise the amount of text messages and phone calls I received from, former roommates, from guys that were on the team, from Division I head coaches around the country. I mean, it was just, one of them was what can we do to help, and two, what's going on. So there's still a lot of discovery right now. I think I've needled the administration enough they're going to give me 6 or 7 questions to be able to answer as a journalist or send along. It's not an interview like I want, but I think it's best I'm going to get. So I'm going to try to capitalize on that and put things together with the study. But the feeling is disbelief, and it's anger. I mean, there's the key when something like this is you got to know where to place your anger. And I get really, I mean, you can probably sense how fired up I get on something like this. And again, I wasn't even an athlete there. It's not like you took my legacy from me. I mean, I was a student radio and broadcaster, but again, I was with those guys all the time. But their legacy's gone. Jeff Rusak, again, the roommate I'm referring to, he was the number 5 seed at the 2002 NCAA tournament, and I saw him just have a really bad tournament, but he got inducted into the ODU Sports Hall of Fame as a 4-time national qualifier. We don't have very many of them, especially in the older eras before Steve Martin got the job. So the legacy of James Nicholson, a 2-time All-American, one of 3 in school history. It's Buddy Lee, who was an Olympian. Buddy Lee was an Olympian, and he wrestled at Old Dominion. Okay, you're eliminating an Olympian from your trophy case essentially. And then what's James Nicholson doing? He says all his stuff is what's it like to see all your hard work boxed up and probably hidden? Who knows? So we don't know what they're going to do with all the wrestling stuff or the facilities, but the mood is still in disbelief. And then, a lot, like with Steve's group, it's a real young alumni group. I mean, he's been the coach for 16 years, but there's still people, they're still coming through that are like, okay, they're adults, but they're still not to the point where they've got that income from being in the workforce for 30, 40 years. So there's situations where we're going to have to look at the young alumni. There's young alumni that are business owners in the place. There's older alumni that wrestled for the old coach, Pete Robinson, the first coach who started the program in 1957. So the feeling is really, I mean, it's almost distrusting. And I think the biggest thing I've heard from, my friends at school isn't coming from slurs. It's coming from the athletes in other sports. I went there when they didn't have football, so I don't know any football players. I don't know really that many of the women's basketball players and the men's basketball players from those eras. I know some of them, but we're not really on, buddy terms. But it's with the swimmers. It's with the soccer players, the women's soccer players. It's with those athletes, the lacrosse players. They see what happens and they read this study and they realize that the school doesn't value them. That's what is the most damaging and hurtful thing. It's the people that feel the wrestlers' pain. It's not just, they know the wrestlers are going to be mad. But when you have basically put a study together that says football and basketball is the only thing you should invest in, you have basically pissed off an alumni base more than I think you can really measure, because the basketball players aren't giving back as much as, they've got 5 to graduate a year. Soccer's got 10 to 15. I mean, where are you investing your money? Well, you've got to make your fan base happy, but just because those are the sports people come to see, the general public, are those the people that came through as an alums? And those soccer players are mad. Those women's soccer players are mad. Those lacrosse players are mad. The wrestlers are mad because the school has basically said, yeah, it's a caste system in college sports. And we knew it. I just didn't want to believe. I was, I guess, ignorant to the fact that, yeah, it could happen at Old Dominion. I thought we were better than that. And I think that's where a lot of my disappointment lies, is we're better than that. We should act better than that. We should have more foresight than that. And situations being what they may, well, this is an act of God here, or whatever you want to describe it. That's really hard you can't really budget for this, but you should have budgeted a little better to not put your teams at risk, because it's poor leadership and bad decision making that put us in this process, not a global pandemic.
Right. So what do we know? They're blaming budgeting issues for dropping wrestling. What do we know about the situation? What's been their response to questions about the situation?
Well, they're not answering any questions about the situation. So It's like, this is our statement. Here it is. The study was put out by the Virginian Pilot, which was one of the papers. Now they've merged with the other papers. So there's one major media outlet in the print world, Daily Press and Virginian Pilot, have kind of combined staffs. And they did a Freedom of Information Act request and got the actual study and published it and wrote a story about it. And the finances, I think it's logical to believe that college sports finances are in a real bind right now. Because we lost March Madness money. We lost championship money from wrestling. We lost College World Series money. We lost Frozen Four money. We lost college lacrosse money. Those are championships that make the NCAA money. We lost TV rights deals. All sorts of budgets, especially at the mid-major level, were impacted. Whereas, $1 million doesn't necessarily move the needle, say, at your alma mater in Stillwater. $1 million moves the needle at CSU Bakersfield, for example. So we're looking at the level of Division I schools impacted by this. So finances were listed as the primary one, and say, well, sports sponsorship, we need to drop a sport. Well, you get into the semantics and nuances of why the study sucks beyond that. But then they used Title IX as a justification, because they added, when they went from FCS to FBS, they added 20-something more scholarships, and that was supposed to be made up somewhere by adding, when they added football, they were supposed to add women's rowing, volleyball, and softball. And volleyball's coming on board. They were already in process of coming on board. So this is not a volleyball problem. But again, Title IX compliance, I believe at this day and age, is absolute bunk, because you don't just happen to have a Title IX problem. You give yourself a Title IX problem. Compliance, it's part of your job as an administrator. There is entire departments within athletic departments that is about compliance, and Title IX compliance is a large part of that. So if you're not paying attention to your Title IX compliance, you're not doing a key portion of the job, like it or not, like what the law allegedly did, or the unseen consequences. I don't know how you want to describe what happened in the 80s and early 90s about the gender cuts that were blamed on Title IX. Well, we're way beyond that. That it's part of college athletics now. So to blame it is disingenuous, because it's your fault for getting yourself in a Title IX situation, because the law has been on the books since 1972. There's no more of this, oops, I didn't know, blame them. That's you not knowing, because that's something that's just it's really irresponsible to have a Title IX issue. Irresponsible. Yeah, you can say what you want about, well, these sports don't make money. There's the model. That's what you have to work with. You know that. This isn't new. So Title IX was one of the issues used. And then sponsorship of wrestling was not a Conference USA sport. Again, Old Dominion came from the Colonial Athletic Association, and which had rivals like VCU. As much as I hate to say their names, they were rivals: George Mason, James Madison, Richmond, William and Mary. So those are Virginia schools. And then you go up in Delaware and Towson and Drexel and Hofstra with wrestling teams came into the CAA, and there was CAA wrestling. They sponsored the sport. This expansion comes around and realignment that just created this crazy world of teams going where, and it was nuts. So, ultimately George Mason went to the Atlantic 10. Old Dominion they had FCS football, and then they got an invite from Conference USA, which at the time had an East Carolina in it, had an SMU, had a Houston, had a Central Florida, had some teams with some football chops to them in the regional tie with East Carolina, and then those teams jumped ship. So here's ODU moving to Conference USA for all their sports, and wrestling. The two most successful individual sports, not counting sailing, because that's not technically an NCAA sport, is women's field hockey with 9 national titles. Conference USA doesn't sponsor field hockey. There's wrestling with 19 All-Americans now. Conference USA doesn't sponsor wrestling. So you put your top men's and women's sport into an all-sports conference that doesn't sponsor them. And then, you can't cut women because of the Title IX compliance. That's even listed in the study. If you're in a financial situation, you have to look at your Title IX numbers. Can you cut a women's program if you're out of compliance? Not a chance. Right. So then they look at, okay, well, wrestling's in Conference USA. Well, they don't sponsor it. We're in the MAC. Well, you put them there. You dissolve the CAA with your move. So you put a team in a position through no fault of their own, and now that is a criteria you use to cut them. So those are the three that are biggest. Obviously, finances is the big thing, but it's when we get to the world of excuses where they don't pass the sniff test. And of course, then they covered everything with this COVID-19 thing, going, well, because of the finances, and we don't know, this is going to impact. And honestly, as soon as I heard it, and I didn't think ODU would be the first to do this. I actually hope they would never be a team to do this. But when this chatter started coming around about the extra year, and I'm sitting there going, this is going to cost schools money, and they're losing money. And I'm worried about programs being cut or being dormant. I mean, whether it be wrestling or other, I'm worried about that being a byproduct of having no ticket fees and no revenue. And I did not expect my alma mater to be, one of the first. McMurray College shut down. They're a Division III school in Illinois. They had men's and women's wrestling. ODU shut down. Spartanburg Methodist has cut its wrestling and tennis teams. It's not been announced by the school yet, but that's a junior college in South Carolina that's hit with a budget crisis, and those sports are gone. So what basically ODU did then with this COVID-19 thing is showed other schools the roadmap and how you cut a team with nobody on campus, nobody to fight back for it, and no money. So the COVID-19 thing is probably the worst part of it from an image standpoint, because come on. It's like one of the most heartless things to do. The kids can't even go to their coach and talk to their coach. They can't get academic support right now without it being on a conference call situation. So that's one of the reasons, again, the money, and that's just it's just the worst timing. I think that's a real bitter pill for people to swallow, is knowing the timing of this, and to do it when the students aren't on campus, the student government can't fight back. You're just like, okay, what is the most proper? What's the best way for us to mitigate the blowback? And yeah, guess what? It's a global pandemic that they used as their excuse. So that also really makes me sick to my stomach about how my alma mater is treating its athletes.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier they said you would need a $25 million endowment. I've seen that on social media as well. Does that seem like something that could happen? Does that seem like something that could get, what's the word I'm trying to, like, bartered? What's the word? Compromise?
I have no idea. I know what word you're getting at, but I'm saying, but thing is, we weren't asked. You know, that's a wrestler that asked the AD, and I wasn't even getting through to the AD the first couple days. And those that follow me on social media know that I was pretty aggressive against ye old alma mater, and more or less from an awareness standpoint. But that number wasn't told to any alumni. That was, James Nicholson is somebody who reached out to Wood Sealing, and I was actually stunned that Wood responded to him initially. And then I understand that the AD has reached out to other alumni and had conversations with them. I know that their external relations director, a new guy named Mike Herman, he's been on since September. Him and I got into it pretty much via email and via social, and we had a phone call, and he kind of, we kind of came to an understanding about the situation in terms of, he didn't have anything to do with it. We know he was just the guy that was not letting me go. They were blocking all interviews. So it was obviously not something that it was personal with me, but I took it personally, and I responded as such. So, but those type of things there's a little bit of communication open, but that doesn't mean it's been forthright, transparent, or forthcoming in any respect. I mean, we're having to rip out some teeth just to get them to say, okay. But we don't know. They it's one of those go to hell numbers where you say, okay, this is the interest we can generate, $1 million, $20 to $25 million is a number that gets thrown around a lot. Some financial people that we know within the sport of wrestling told me that $10 million was a more realistic figure for that type of endowment, for that type of school. And, we'll wait and see, but they haven't given us the option. And what's usually happens is what happened at like Bucknell is you've got a money guy that wants to bring a program back. Well, you've got to pay for a couple other sports to make sure you get your Title IX compliance taken care of. Because once wrestling's off the table, to add it back, you have another Title IX compliance situation. But, oh boy, I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for a plan. Give us an option. If we can't do it, we can't do it. But ask. I think that's the one thing that we want to know the most is you throw $25 million out there. Is that, are you going to give us a plan? Are you going to give us time to raise X amount of money to generate operating costs for X amount of years? I mean, you can't nobody's going to sit there and drop $25 million on your doorstep right now. I mean, a concerted effort, but again, look at the crisis we're in. How many of these people that actually have the money are business owners? They're losing money. I mean, it's like they're playing the financial crisis against the wrestling community. And it's kind of like, really, we might be able to do this on a perfect day. And this is tough for a lot of us financially. So, I mean, I know that speaking frankly from a business standpoint, yeah, Old Dominion's a client. They're shutting down the program, blaming COVID-19 just cost my business money from my alma mater, so it's one of those things like even my giving would be impacted. It's just such a micro level. So, and I'm like far from essential, when it comes to things like this. So, it just seems like the timing, and you got to give us a roadmap. If you're genuine and throwing out a number, well, guess what? We can hold you to it. Not like the university. If you're really serious about cutting a men's sport, why don't you give that alumni base the opportunity? If baseball was on the table, like the study said, guess what? I mean, a couple guys in the major leagues know a little bit about baseball and Old Dominion. Dan Hudson, you might have heard of him. Justin Verlander, you might have heard of him. A couple other players that have come from ODU. Soccer, I mean, they've been ranked in the top 10 quite a bit in the last 20 years. I mean, when I was there, Coach Dawson had him ranked number 2 in the country. So it's one of those things where you've got to give these alumni, if you put these sports on the table, you've got to give them a chance to save themselves versus, is it a cost cutting? Can we get this outside funding? I mean, you got to give them the chance. If you care about your student athletes, you can't just roll over and die on them.
Yeah. So how do you think moving forward, like other wrestling fans can ensure that their alma mater doesn't make a crazy decision like this? What do you think are steps for that?
Well, here's the thing. We thought we were doing everything right at ODU. We had good funding. And again, I'm not in the wrestling, ledger, so to speak. But again, they were hitting the grades. They were getting performance. They're, doing the things from the community service. They weren't looked at as, the wrestling team. Oh, great. Bunch of these meathead hood rats. That's not how the wrestling team was looked at. They were leaders in the academic community. I mean, you got guys like Shane Jones, man. This kid was a walk-on and became a team captain. He's the guy that wrestling is like it was about. He's from like Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, and he came out and he really became one of those guys that just represented college sports so well in the wrestling program. So his sister played field hockey at Old Dominion too. So you've got a family that comes from Pennsylvania that represents the school so well. And wrestling represented the school very well. And when you've got, Larry Early on the podium last year and Chris McCarty, a two-time All-American, you got Ryan Williams in the finals in 2008. You want to talk about notoriety and national exposure. I mean, there's no bigger national exposure sports outlet than the network, ESPN, and they don't have the basketball championships. They have wrestling that weekend, and they do a lot of it online, and there's a lot of eyeballs. And a lot of people have said, I wouldn't have known anything about Old Dominion if it wasn't for wrestling. And, for the once every 5 to 6 years that they get into the round ball tournament and they're the trendy pick to beat Michigan State or that legendary triple overtime victory over Villanova in 1995, well, that's once in a blue moon. You're seeing wrestlers out there on the podium every year, and there's drive-by people that say, oh, yeah, I saw that kid from ODU. He was it the Midlands finals? Jack Decco wins the Midland. It's a Big Ten network. I mean, you want to talk about exposure. It's not just the NCAA championship. So the school had been doing the right things. The funding was good. The fully funded, they really well within. I think there was a little bit they even got a little cut of the MAC TV deal because they were in the MAC for wrestling, and their matches were streamed on ESPN3. And you hit the grades, you hit the performance, you do the right things, and you all of a sudden wonder, well, we did the right things. It makes it tough when they move the goalposts on you. And when you say, okay, here's the blueprint, all the best practices they were doing. And, there's a hiccup here and there, but I mean, that's just with any program. You have something, somebody comes in, somebody comes out, you might have a dip in an APR for a year or two, and then you're back at it. So it's just frustrating to know that this staff did everything they could and have been doing everything they could. You got guys, young coaches like Kevin Beasley and Daryl Thomas and Steve Blyce on the staff this year. And then you've had guys like Mike Dixon come through, Matt Storniolo. They've done good things, and they learned, and then they brought those things to their programs where they're at now. And there's ways to run programs, and they were running the program the way you should run a program to make sure that you are not one of those expendable sports. I mean, the hardest thing that made them expendable is something that the university did to them, not anything they did on their own. And that's, again, one of those things where, Taylor, I don't know if there is a playbook you can copy now, because this was a team that didn't look like it would be cut because it checked all the boxes. It checked all the boxes. And it's one of those things where even the athletic director told one of our alumni that if this isn't an All-American contest, if it was, you guys would have won. And that's disheartening, too, to know that your performance doesn't matter. Your performance doesn't matter. So if anything now, it's like work to endow your programs. I know people have talked about giving your programs, and we've been beating that drum for well over a decade and a half now. But is where do you invest your money? And that also comes into a situation of where are you putting your money? Is it into the RTC or is it into the athletic fund? If that's a wrestling fund, who's going to benefit here? What happens? So, I mean, that's another, byproduct of something like this is where you donate. I don't know the correct answer. I mean, you've got to endow programs. You've got to endow coaching positions and things like that. And right now, can we do that as a country financially? I mean, who's got extra money thrown around? It's like, well, toilet paper or a wrestling program. I mean, that's obviously a lot hyperbole there, but, you get the point. I mean, there's budget issues are hitting everybody, not just college sports. So we have to decide where our discretionary income goes. And, if I could give if I had $25 million in my bank account right now, I'd be giving it to Old Dominion. Much as I know that they probably don't care about those athletes, I'm still going to do everything I can to keep wrestling there, because that's a sport that, if it wasn't for Old Dominion University Wrestling, I would not be here in wrestling. Even as bad as we were when I was coming through, and the stories we've got of wrestling nobody in the field house, it was just like those things, and the relationship with Gray Simons, the opportunity to announce home matches, the opportunity to just be there and then get that support. Even the administration, when I was coming through, they didn't fully fund it at the time, but they didn't not care. It was not their highest priority. Basketball was, but at the same point, they didn't crap on the athletes. That office, every time I pop my head in there to complain about something from a media standpoint, they listen to me. They actually, they actually cared to the point where you knew it. I mean, it's like, okay, we're not a perfect department, but you know what? We care about all our athletes. And that's what I got out of the school. And then, taking the time to work through and things with writing and, developing wrestling features and stuff for the school paper and radio. And it just really helped me, my jumping off point and announcing high school tournaments. If it wasn't for Old Dominion Wrestling, I honestly can say I would not be announcing the Olympics. I would not be announcing the NCAA championships. I would not be in a situation where I'm at today. It really, ODU as a whole had so much to do with that. But when it comes to the wrestling community, it was definitely Old Dominion Wrestling program that really kind of sucked me in when I was starting a wrestling website when I was 18 years old in my dorm room. So, the greater athletics departments had a huge impact on me. The wrestling program has had a specialized impact on me. And this whole situation just really saddens me as an alum because I've said it time and time again. I thought we were better than that.
Yeah. Well, it's about time to wrap it up. Do you have any closing thoughts or anything lighthearted?
Lighthearted. I will tell you this. I kind of touched on this on the PA Power podcast a little bit, but so much of college athletics is looked at as wins and losses. And I've mentioned the time that we were not very good in college. And, I think the best team we had when I was in school was probably my freshman year. A guy named Mark Strickland was nationally ranked, was in the blood laughing in the blood round. Jamie Kelly, the late Jamie Kelly, he just passed away this year. He was a national qualifier. We had guys like Paul Jimenez, he was a national qualifier eventually. Chad Filson was one of my roommates from PA. I actually wrestled Sean Gray in the CAA finals, and Virginia Tech was in the conference at the time. And I can tell you this, when you are a mid-major without football, and basketball, men's and women's basketball are your thing. And women's basketball is a thing at Old Dominion. 3 national titles. Coach Nikki McRae has done an awesome job in bringing the Lady Monarchs back. Or I don't know if they're still going by Lady Monarchs right now because there's a controversy about them dropping the word lady. But they're still the Lady Monarchs to me. They know the women's basketball. And, I went to the Elite Eight. I went to so many of these women's basketball championships and covered them in the media. And then so many nights we spent at the swimming house and the wrestling house and the women's soccer house and spring breaks in the Outer Banks with all the athletes from lacrosse. And, I might I'm not going to throw everybody under the bus here, but like the pitcher races that the lacrosse team did at Pizza Inn across from karaoke night at Batterson's. There are things that involve athletics that were not involving athletics that really bring a team together. They bring a group of people together. They bring a group of friends for life together. And I joke about this stuff being able to say, I can't write a book about the things I know in wrestling until all my friends are dead. And yeah, well, probably the same thing when it comes to Old Dominion athletics, because there's some great times we had, and I wouldn't trade any of those friendships for life and for anything. And those things we had so many good times. We had so many times that were probably not be really, there were some things we did that would probably be frowned upon by our coaches and our athletic administration and maybe the local uniformed constabulary. But we were brothers and sisters together. We had such a good time. And I mean, I still have pictures. Thank goodness there was no Facebook when I was in college because, oh man, I mean, that's the thing. If I ever run for office, or my friends run for office, they've got to have me on their staff because I've got the dirt on everybody. That's kind of the thing. So we just had so much fun. And that's probably one thing. It's like now we're going to look back at our time instead of talking about our memories. We're going to be talking about, man, we don't have wrestling anymore. And so groups like us coming through that won't have that camaraderie to build together and do it at a school that really did give me opportunities. I mean, I wouldn't say I went there specifically for communications and journalism. They had pretty good departments. I was working at the newspaper already. I was there just to get the degree, but ultimately I did learn some things. I had some really good professors along the way that helped me with balancing what I'm going through right now, emotion and ethics, because this is a situation like wrestling. We cover a lot of our friends, and there are situations we get put into that we're like, well, how do we write about something that we saw that we kind of can't say we saw, or how do we write about something that's bad about one of our friends that may happen? And you're like, that's the same thing that's happening here. I have to cover something that I hate about a school that I love. Mm-hmm. And it's all because of those memories and things. It's not about, the blue and the silver and, how many women's basketball titles we've won, or the 9 field hockey national championships, or the 1975 men's basketball Division II championship, or Wayne Bright being the last man Dan Gable beat in college. That's a true story, by the way. It's just all those things that come together with it. And there's so many fun stories that when we get together at nationals and we get together when I go back home, Virginia Beach, I want to spend time with my guys. I spend more time with my wrestling roommates when I go back to Virginia than I do my own family. Cause I mean, they are a big part of my family. So I don't know if that's lighthearted, but that's something that's from the heart. I look to go, hey, where's Joe Wright? Where's Chad Filson? Where's Dennis Whitby? Where's Jeff Rusak? I mean, I'm thankful one of those guys lives here in Minnesota, Charlie Bush. I get to see one of my college buddies, as much as we can when we're both married with 2 kids. But we go for wings and beers. We were looking forward to having the Nationals here. I was looking forward to having all those friends come over here to this speakeasy that is painted blue, white, and silver. It was, all those things I was looking forward to. And hopefully, I mean, we can still have a team to talk about and about our good times too. So that's the one thing I think I take away from my time at ODU is really the friendships and the relationships there, and the relevance that the wrestling team helped me personally attain, and the relevance that the athletics department allowed me to cover in terms of being able to broadcast games against UConn and Tennessee, powerhouses in women's basketball, to broadcast the first game at the Constant Center, which was North Carolina. Yeah, I mean, North Carolina opened up the Ted Constant Center against ODU in men's basketball. To be at the first football game against Division II Shawan when we hadn't had football since, like the Valley Authority, I don't know, the 1940s when we were junior college. So there's so many great memories that I can go on for hours and hours and hours against. And if I looked up those 20-something thousand pictures I've got, I'm pretty sure we can tell a story about each and every Thursday at Batterson's. That's you remember what happened after that? I'm sure. I mean, just that's how the stories start, and hopefully that's not how they finish.
Yeah. All right. Well, Jason, thanks for coming on and giving us a little insight, and hopefully there's something that can be done to save the program. So.
Hope so too. Thanks, Taylor.
Yeah, thanks.